Have you ever watched a historical battle in a movie and thought, I wonder what would happen if they had machine guns? Of course you have. That's why you're here. So let's explore that twisted fantasy of yours.
Yeah, boy.
And revisit the legendary Battle of Thermopylae. Hello, hey, hi. Welcome back to another episode of Tactical Analysis, the series where we take an iconic battle from cinema, replace one of the belligerents with a modern military force, and then apply contemporary tactics to explore how said force might go about winning said battle. To present this to you in a coherent sequence, I'll loosely apply the principles of military planning to analyze the enemy force, the friendly force, and terrain, before developing a battle plan and running an animated simulation on how this revised scenario might just play out. Before diving in, let's set the scene. The Battle of Thermopylae was fought in 480 BC between the defending city-states of Greece and the invading Persian Empire. King Leonidas of Sparta led 7,000 Greeks consisting of Spartans, Thespians, Thebans, and Phocians into a defensive position at the hot gates of Thermopylae. This strategic critical terrain was chosen to canalize the Persian legions and negate the advantages of their cavalry and speed. The battle occurred over 3 days. That is, they were fighting during the daytime and not 72 hours straight. You see, back in the days of old-timey warfare like this, the two armies would spend the day slaughtering each other in a field by day, and then retire to their camps to feast, drink, and rest throughout the evening. This was due to various reasons, including practical constraints, such as the associated chaotic command and control, and identifying friend from foe. But there were also cultural motivations, with nighttime in general being fraught with superstition, and night combat being viewed as dishonorable or even immoral. Day one of the battle sees the Persians kick off with probing attacks and light infantry attacks, before being easily repelled by the legendary Spartan phalanx. Day 2 sees a heavier push, with Xerxes committing his more elite troops, the Immortals. The Greeks and Spartans defending the hot gates would rotate in shifts on the very front lines, while also feigning retreats to lure the Persians into kill zones. On day 3 of the battle, the Persians dispatch a 20,000 strong flanking force through a narrow mountain pass, which was revealed to Xerxes the previous day by the Greek traitor Ephialtes. News of this impending and decisive flanking attack caused Leonidas to dismiss 4,000 troops, while remaining in place with a rearguard to act as a delaying force, before going out swinging in one of history's most famous last stands. So that's the historically accurate version in a nutshell, but our recreation will also be referencing Zack Snyder's 300, a hyper-violent, stylized, but not quite accurate portrayal of the battle, based on the Frank Miller comics of the same name and starring real fake natty Scottish Spartan Gerard Butler.
This is Sparta!
Some of the key divergences between Snyder's vision and the real battle include the troops involved, with the film omitting the 1,000 or so Thespians from the final stand, letting the Spartans claim all the glory. The physical terrain, which shows Thermopylae as a barren, black-charred, post-apocalyptic wasteland-looking thing, instead of being relatively vegetated and swampy. And Ephialtes, who was in reality some random, opportunistic, and morally flexible farmer.
Ooh, a piece of candy.
Who just thought he'd score some quick Persian gold, and not some festy goblin creature yearning for the approval of the Spartans as shown in the film. And Xerxes was not actually a 10-foot tall gold-encrusted giant. With that being said, these exaggerations make sense from a storytelling point of view, as the film cleverly uses the narration of Dilios, the lone survivor from Leonidas's original 300, to recount the tale to the larger Spartan army and by proxy, us as the viewers. The craziness on display therefore makes complete sense once you realize the fantastic version of the battle we're watching is Dilios's highly embellished and fanciful recollection of events. This is fun, as it's pretty much the historical equivalent of a modern soldier telling his war stories down in the pub, and I think the film deserves more credit than it gets, as this detail is often forgotten or willfully ignored by critics of the gratuitous violence and stylistic flair. Film tangent aside, my overriding caveat is that historical accuracy is not the aim of the game, and I'll be mixing both historical truths with the absurdity of the film, which ultimately makes it easier to accept the absurd premise of this very scenario. If you're after a more historically accurate rundown, you should check out one of these many more serious videos on the topic. Part 1. Enemy Force Analysis.
This is madness!
In 300's fever dream rendition of the tale, the Persian army advancing on Thermopylae is a decadent, demonic horde consisting of zealots, slaves, and monstrosities. The Persians are caricatured as a diverse and multi-ethnic freak show, in contrast to the oil dabs and uniformity of the Spartans. Command and control. The supreme commander of the Persian invasion force is Xerxes. In real life, fourth king of the Achaemenid Empire and son of Darius the Great. In the film, a gold glittering giant of a man-baby with the emotional restraint of a small child. The Persians employ a rigid command system, with Xerxes having ultimate control of all decision-making and strategy. However, at times, generals and provincial governors held a degree of autonomy, albeit with stringent oversight from the king. At Thermopylae, however, Xerxes was physically present, and as such was ultimately the sole authority for all tactical movements and decisions during the battle. In terms of their general composition, the film implies the Persians number in the millions, but the real-world estimates cite between 100,000 to 300,000 troops, consisting of an assault force of approximately 200,000 infantry and light horse-mounted cavalry, the elites, consisting of the immortals, numbering some 10,000, ranged units including archers, grenadiers, specialists such as executioners, brutes, and war beasts, and supporting elements such as combat engineers, logistic slaves, emissaries, couriers and spies, blacksmiths, sappers, camp cooks, and foragers. Assets and weapons. Melee weapons are wielded by most of the assaulters, such as the infantry and archers, and include short spears and daggers known as akinakas, whatever this is. The light infantry and archers favoured a woven wicker shield, which offered some protection from sword strikes. The immortals were shown dual-wielding scimitars and were equipped with heavier steel plate armour than their light infantry peers. The brutes from the immortals and some of the monstrosity specialists are shown wielding an assortment of other melee weapons such as axes, cleavers, and whips, chains, and flails. The workhorse from the ranged weapons was the bow. Now, the bow was the national arm of the Persian Empire, and the Persians were trained from as young as 5 to use their signature composite recurve bow. The Achaemenid bowmen were highly regarded by their Greek and Macedonian enemies, and a typical tactic was to stack their archers 9 rows deep behind a shield wall. And in such a formation, 10,000 troops could fire up to 100,000 arrows per minute for a limited time. Impressive stuff. I found a source stating the bow's effective range was 700 meters, and personally find this claim questionable. So I'll apply some more modern estimates and break it down as the archers have a point target range of 100 meters and an area target range of 300 meters. Point being a single well-defined and precise target that can be repeatedly, reliably hit by a single firer, and area target being a large, less defined object, for example, a mass of troops. Aside from bowmen, the film also shows these extravagant bomber-throwing grenadiers who toss a rudimentary fragmentation explosive at very short distances. The battle beasts consist of both armored rhinoceros and elephants. Both were used to trample defensive lines and achieve break-ins into enemy formations, with the elephants more being used as troop carrying and fire support platforms, carrying mounted archers which could rain down arrows on defending troops. The beasts were controlled by specially trained handlers known as mahouts to the Persians. Mission. The broader mission of the Persians was the eventual conquest of Greece. Thermopylae in itself was not a specified objective, but was an unavoidable piece of terrain that the Greeks had wisely elected to site a defensive position on. Accordingly, in modern military flow, the Persian tactical mission statement might look something like: Combined Joint Task Force God King is to seize objective Hot Gate no later than D+3 in order to degrade Greek defensive cohesion and allow subsequent exploitation of the Hellenic Peninsula. Center of gravity. At first glance, the center of gravity might appear to be the numerical mass of the Persians, but considering the film's depiction, Xerxes' centralized command and divine authority, I think, is the center of gravity of the Persian army. While the colossal numbers are important, Xerxes himself is the linchpin holding together a shaky coalition of culturally disparate, both professional and conscripted forces. If that confidence or obedience to said authority collapsed, the cohesion and will will to fight of the Persian army would rapidly deteriorate. Critical capabilities. The immense numerical advantage of the Persian army means they can saturate terrain through sheer numbers and sustained assaults, effectively out-retreating their adversaries. Ample auxiliary forces means Xerxes can not only claim, but then hold captured areas as long as desired, in contrast to a smaller force which might lack the numbers needed to occupy seized objectives once captured. Previously captured cities and regions serve as vassal states, supplying manpower and resources to the Persian army. This in turn allows Xerxes to expand his reach and regenerate forces almost indefinitely. Critical requirements. The immense size and character of the Persian army is most effective in open terrain. Such ground offers maximum moving space for the Persian cavalry divisions and allows archers and ranged units to be employed to best effect. A continuous supply of rations, weapons, and reinforcements is essential for operational endurance. Sufficient foragers, hunters, camp cooks, and water carriers must accompany the expeditionary force on the march to enable daily sustainment of the fighting units. And Xerxes' tight control is predicated on his reputation as an unkillable deity-like figurehead. His physical condition and credibility must therefore be safeguarded by a royal guard, and ongoing pomp and ceremony is necessary to retain his aura. Critical vulnerabilities. Narrow or complex terrain such as that found in Thermopylae nullify the numerical advantages of Xerxes' hordes. Without space to maneuver at speed or mass their forces, the army is forced to face numerically inferior foes at parity. Xerxes, being the final authority on all decisions, even at the tactical level, hinders the speed at which actions can be conducted. An over-reliance on a high commander can also limit creativity from frontline forces and reduce their ability to adapt to changing situations. Most obviously, the death of Xerxes, particularly from enemy action, would cause immediate disarray in the Persian force. Without fear of divine reprisal, the less disciplined or conscripted forces would likely fracture, refusing to partake in combat or simply retreat en masse. Part 2. Friendly force analysis.
What is your profession?
Given the location and history behind this battle, there's really only one appropriate choice for the friendly force: the modern Hellenic army. Specifically, the Special Paratrooper Section, or ETA. ETA is Greece's premier special operations unit and is trained in strategic reconnaissance, direct action raids, counter-terrorism, and unconventional warfare. Like most SOF units, details of their selection and training is tightly guarded. However, ETA personnel are shown to be versed in advanced insertion methods, roping, CQB, breaching, sniping, and heavy weapons. Admittedly, holding a static defensive position like Thermopylae is arguably a task more apt for conventional infantry, but given the elite legacy of the Spartans, a modern special operations unit is more aligned with the spirit of the film. Order of battle. ETA falls under the 1st Raider Paratrooper Brigade, an airborne infantry and SOF unit within the Hellenic army. Although they are administratively part of the brigade, ETA itself reports directly to the Greek Defense Ministry Joint Rapid Response Command, bloody mouthful, a headquarters element similar to the American JSOC, which has operational control over special operations units from all branches of the Greek military. A little is known for certain about the precise composition of ETA as a subunit, but sources indicate it consists of 100 operators broken into teams based on their insertion speciality, being air, mountain, or water. For the purpose of this video, ETA will be restructured into Task Force Spartan, consisting of 3 like platoons, each with 3 teams. In the case of this scenario, their insertion skills are largely irrelevant, as we'll be plugging them straight into the hot gates and have them holding their ground as a souped-up light infantry formation. Command and control. Special operations troops like ETA typically enjoy a high degree of autonomy compared to their conventional army counterparts, and use mission command as a core philosophy. Mission command entails empowering a subordinate unit to act with decentralized authority. Doing so gives them the flexibility and creativity to complete the mission, requiring only the commander's broader intent, as opposed to rigid or specific instructions. In simple terms, think of it as issuing the what and why of an order, but leaving the how up to the unit conducting the mission. In a situation like Thermopylae, this would manifest as the 3 separate troops or platoons able to conduct highly independent or unlike tasks, however all aligned in the achievement of a higher collective mission. Assets and weapons. ETA has access to a broad range of small arms and support weapons beyond that of standard infantry. With internally qualified forward observers and JTACs, they would enjoy priority offensive support from assets such as artillery and the AH-64 Apache gunship. However, for this scenario, they're going to be stripped of any indirect fire or air support and forced to use only their organic ground-based weapon systems and assets. Their equipment consists of modern load-bearing kit, complete with composite ballistic plates and Kevlar soft armor. Modern ballistic helmets also provide protection against fragmentation and pistol rounds, and in some cases rifle rounds. But much of a modern soldier is still exposed to strikes from bladed weapons. The iconic bronze hoplon shield of the Spartans has been lost to history, but replaced with modern ballistic shields and riot shields, the former being much heavier and offering protection from rifle fire, commonly used in counter-terrorism operations, and the latter being much lighter but only protecting the user from low-velocity projectiles. YouTube shows that arrows can sort of penetrate riot shields. However, it's worth noting that these videos show this using modern rigs and modern arrowheads fired at point-blank range. So at the extended distances of the Persian archery volleys, I think it's fair to say the modern Greek riot shields can comfortably protect their users, much like their Spartan predecessors. In terms of their small arms, they have access to a wide range of individual weapons, including the Glock, the M4 carbine, the AOR M21 carbine, and the G3A4. Broadly speaking, any of the sidearms have a max effective range of 50 meters, and their personnel rifles have an effective range of 300 meters. In terms of their belt-fed weapons, they have access to light machine guns such as the FN Minimi, medium machine guns such as the Mag 58, and of course the M2 Browning 50 caliber heavy machine gun. Precision and sniper weapons come in the form of the M110, the Accuracy International AXMC, the Steyr SSG, the Barrett M82, and the Barrett M95. As a special operations unit, they also have access to a broad range of explosives and heavy weapons, usually vehicle mounted, such as the M203 40mm grenade launcher, the Mark 19 or HK GMG automatic grenade launchers, the AT4 light anti-tank weapon, the Carl Gustav 84mm medium anti-tank weapon, and explosives such as C4, claymores, and demolition charges. In terms of their vehicles, the Special Operations Brigade uses both the Humvee and MRZR Polaris tactical vehicles. Light vehicles such as these are essentially the modern battle chariot, and they allow units to rapidly strike with relatively heavy firepower and withdraw without becoming decisively engaged. This tactic has been a staple of special operations in modern history, ranging from World War II to Iraq, and the Humvees are used in both the armoured and light reconnaissance variants, while the Polarises favour mobility over protection. Although special operations and not conventional infantry, they too have access to big army defensive stores, such as wire. More on that later. As a final note on their kit, the Greeks, like many special operations units around the globe, have fallen victim to the multicam plague. But fortunately, they can still be seen wearing a modernized version of their classic Greek lizard camouflage pattern.
Very based.
Mission. When inspired by the events of the film, the Greek mission statement is pretty simple. Task Force Spartan is to retain objective Hot Gates until day +3 in order to block the Persian invasion of mainland Greece. Like the film, the Greeks' goal is not necessarily to destroy the Persians to a man, however must leverage the terrain to inflict a crushing tactical defeat in order to fray the resolve of their army and strip Xerxes of his credibility. As Leonidas himself says,
Xerxes' losses will be so great, his men so demoralized, he will have no choice but to abandon his campaign.
The figure of what these losses must be depends on factors such as the overall size, morale, ability to spawn reinforcements, and the intensity of the combat. But a commonly applied rule of thumb is that above 30% casualty rate is cause for a unit becoming combat ineffective and losing the ability to sustain offensive operations. Ergo, the Greeks must aim to inflict around 90,000 casualties, that is dead or critically wounded, onto the 300,000 strong Persian army. Center of gravity. The Greeks' technical overmatch is perhaps unsurprisingly their center of gravity. The thrown spears of old are replaced with rifle fire, and the protective shield phalanx is replaced with walls of interlocking machine gun fire. Like the Spartans, the Greek operators are able to tackle adversaries of larger size than their small unit through superior training, tactical cohesion, and righteous resistance. That is, knowing they're fighting for the very existence of their homeland. Critical capabilities. Unlike ancient battles, the accuracy of modern weapons permits specific units or even personnel to be targeted at will. Precision sniping can selectively destroy enemy leadership, and anti-tank weapon systems can destroy heavy or elite behemoth units. Modern firepower allows layering of even direct fire weapons such as light, medium, and heavy machine guns. Light tactical vehicles provide mounted mobility to harass the enemy at distance, causing them to deploy early and delay their advance. And engagement areas can be developed at long range. range, destroying enemy formations well before they arrive at the objective. Mission command in use across the Greek platoons and teams means they can rapidly recognize, plan, and act upon changes in the battlefield environment, without the need for orders or prompting. This makes for a highly adaptable force down to the individual Greek operator, owing to their high initiative, confidence, and morale. Critical requirements. Unsurprisingly, the modern force is only at a decisive advantage so long as it can continue using its modern weapons. In this case, the Greek defenders must be equipped with sufficient ammunition to sustain combat operations against a force 300,000 strong. Dynamic adaptability is only possible with constant collective awareness of the battle space. Radio communications down to the individual operator is essential to ensure that all personnel are aware of changes in the tactical situation. With limited manpower, Task Force Spartan must rely on its enhanced sensors and UAS to supplement their security plan. Drones are essential in this way for providing early warning on enemy approach by screening avenues of approach unobservable or beyond the range of human sentries. Night vision and thermal optics also provide detection overmatch against adversaries not in possession of such technology. Critical vulnerabilities. With limited personnel, the defenders can only lock down a limited number of approach routes. Small forces in such circumstances are vulnerable to being outflanked, bypassed, or cut off from friendly reinforcements or supply lines. Even with theoretically unlimited ammunition, sustained fire accumulates wear and tear on small arms and equipment. Working parts such as bolts and pistons can snap, weapon sights and optics can lose zero or break, and machine gun barrels glow white-hot and overheat. At the real Battle of Thermopylae, the 1,000-strong defenders frequently rotated their frontline troops to ensure that the phalanx was fresh and battle-ready. Task Force Spartan will have no such luxury, and with only 100 soldiers sharing the tasks of holding the pass, flank and re-security, and quick reaction force, rest will be a rare commodity. Part 3. Terrain Analysis.
Now, in that narrow corridor, their numbers will count for nothing.
Define the broader area of operations. Thermopylae, named after the nearby thermal springs, sits approximately 140 kilometers northwest of Athens, on what was at the time the region of Malis. Geographically, it is flanked to the south by Mount Kallidromo, the Malian Gulf to the north, with the terrain opening up to coastal floodplains to the east. The landscape today looks significantly different owing to the shoreline expanding over the centuries, meaning the pass has now opened into a plain of farmland and motorways. But at the time, the narrowest point was no more than 50 meters wide, flanked by steep mountainside and the ocean. It's worth noting the tight canyon and precarious ocean cliffs shown in the film was a stylistic choice, and for the sake of map design, I'll be working with the more historically correct terrain. The cool thing about Thermopylae is it's a real place. You can simply go there, and I recommend you do. I've been fortunate enough to visit a few historical battlefields in my days, but Thermopylae is something special. As a bonus and lesser-known historical tidbit, there were numerous other battles fought here over the ages, with the most recent being the 1941 Battle of Thermopylae, which saw the Anzacs defend the pass against the German 6th Mountain Division and 5th Panzer Division. There's a memorial plaque to the battle adjacent to the statue of Leonidas himself. Pretty sick. Moving on with terrain appreciation, OCOCA is a common analytical tool used to identify important aspects of the physical battle space relevant to the mission. Observation and fields of fire. The coastal approach road provides defenders with observation out to 2 kilometers, albeit in a narrow arc of visibility. The mountainous terrain to the south is low-set but thick scrubland, reducing the visibility for both defenders and attackers who decide to occupy or move through the area. The vegetation thins out substantially at sea level along the coast, with open plains and marshes making visibility and direct fire possible out to maximum small arms range. Cover and concealment. Existing cover for the defenders exists in the form of the Phocian Wall, a formidable stone wall that in its original condition featured a gate and parapet. By the time of the Spartans' battle, however, the wall had degraded to a low-set rubble. At the hot gates, the ground is hard limestone, making substantial digging and excavation with hand tools untenable, which limits the construction of below-ground fighting positions or trenches. Obstacles. The very geography of Thermopylae itself is a natural obstacle to attacking forces, funneling masses of troops into the concentrated narrow front. The approaching terrain features river systems that run from the mountains to the coastline. These watercourses, such as the Asopos River, further hinder movement, mandating that approaching armies converge to bridges or narrow crossing points where the shallow water can be traversed. Key terrain. The pass entrance is the decisive terrain of the AO. Defenders holding the hot gates can inflict casualties disproportionate to their numbers and focus their defense onto a single, tight frontage. Avenues of approach. The primary route is the coastal track from the Thessaly direction, contouring the base of the mountains and hugging the coastline. Up until reaching Thermopylae, the track can support large troop movements in the open plains to either side of the pass, but tightens to within 50 meters at the hot gates proper. The secondary approach is the Anapia path through the mountains. This 15-kilometer goat track offers a more concealed option for attackers, however is narrow and arduous, limiting movement to single-file foot advance. Tactically, the Anapia path gives attackers a means to outflank or bypass the hot gates, if not adequately blocked by defenders. This is the route that Ephialtes, the traitor, guided the Persian immortals through on the second night of the battle, and the flanking maneuver that would ultimately lead to the demise of Leonidas and the Spartans. Part 4. Battle Plan.
Wave after wave of Persian attack will smash!
To best employ our Greek special forces, we will go through the doctrinal steps of engagement area development to give Task Force Spartan a workable defensive plan. I will use a modified version of the US Army template for this, but if you'd like to step through this process yourself, defending your Roblox house or what have you, I've made a single-page cheat sheet you can download for free on the website. Check it out here. Identify likely enemy avenues of approach. We know with certainty the Persians are approaching along the peninsula from the northwest. The aforementioned coastal road is their most likely approach route towards the hot gates, with the Anapia path being the less likely avenue of approach. Determine enemy scheme of maneuver. Xerxes' enormous army's first order of business on entering the AO will be to establish a camp. This will allow their rear echelons to catch up and establish their stables, blacksmiths, field kitchens, and everything else you can imagine an army of this size would need. Once firm in their camp, they can prepare troops for the attack and allocate their units to specific assembly areas. In terms of their assault tactics, based on the slow-mo slaughter shown in the film, the Persians employ human wave assaults to grind down the defenders with sheer volume and attrition, starting with dismounted infantry, archery, barrages, and cavalry charges. If these fail to secure the objective, the elite units come into play. Time out. It's around this point of these videos you might get to thinking.
Xerxes doesn't know he's up against modern soldiers, and if he did know he was up against modern tech and not Spartans, he wouldn't pointlessly waste thousands of men lives charging machine guns. This is not fair.
Putting aside that the core concept of these videos is inherently unfair, and the real-world examples where thousands of lives were pointlessly wasted charging machine guns, this sentiment is only true of real-life, rational, sound-of-mind Xerxes, who was trained from birth to be a leader and military tactician. If that Xerxes were involved, and knew what we know now, he would likely A. not attack at all and conduct further reconnaissance, B. attempt to send spies or raiders to try and capture the Spartan technology, C. immediately seek out a diplomatic solution, knowing his adversary is seemingly equipped with magic super weapons, or D, a combination of any of the above. But remember, we're working with gold body paint, heavily pierced, utterly insane Zack Snyder film Xerxes, who is evidently not shy of a spot of pointless attrition, and with his arrogance and god complex would arguably be willing to entertain days of mass casualties in pursuit of glory, remaining deluded to his situation even in the face of superior weaponry. But most importantly, if Xerxes hears of the Greek firepower and simply flees back to Persia, then I don't have a video. So with that in mind, suspend your disbelief and roll with the silliness so we can replay the battle as it happened in the film. Okay? Like I was saying, if a conventional infantry assault fails, Xerxes commits his elite troops, the immortals and brutes, to breach the defensive lines, supplemented by war beasts and offensive support from massed archery fire. Wherever possible, the Persians will use their mass to envelop static enemy positions, using cavalry or elites to rapidly flank the main body using alternate avenues of approach. Determine where to kill the enemy. The Greek plan will employ a defense in-depth strategy, involving a main defensive position and mobile delaying force. Battle position Ares is the anvil to the Persian hammer, and includes the hot gates and the Phocian wall. Battle position Ares is sited onto engagement area Zeus. This is the primary killing ground where the layered defensive fire will be sited. Targeted area of interest Hera is placed to target the Persian army on their approach march, forcing them to deploy their vanguard early, thereby delaying their arrival, achieving early attrition, and buying further time for the preparation of the main defensive position. Plan and integrate obstacles. This step involves constructing or integrating obstacles into the fire plan. First is the remnants of the Phocian wall. The ETA operators will have to roll up their sleeves and get sandbagging to build up hardpoints along the existing stone wall. It doesn't have to be a colossal defensive structure, but provides sufficient protection from thrown spears, stones, bombas, and other projectiles. Time permitting, overhead protection should also be erected for protection from archery volleys, and a gap in the middle of the coastal road must be left for vehicle access, which can be temporarily closed with a makeshift gate. I mentioned wire early in the video, and if you've been around for a while, you'll know I'm a big fan of wire, the use of which in the Helm's Deep video generated some robust discussion in the comments. particularly regarding its effectiveness against urukai. Fortunately for the wire skeptics, we're no longer up against 2-meter-tall superhuman monsters, but regular men far more susceptible to its prickly ways. This wire should be integrated into EA Zeus, with the golden rule of obstacles being to cover them with fire. The first layer is a set of offset concertina wire chicanes, interspersed with a nest of low wire entanglement. The chicanes are necessary on account of the aforementioned vehicle movement, and the low wire will severely disrupt enemy troops weaving their way through the concertina rows. The first line of obstacles will supplement the close-in fight, that is the immediate battle between the Greeks and charging Persian infantry and cavalry. This wire plan will be repeated at the 300-meter mark to disrupt the Persian archery formations and prevent them from establishing their base of fire for their massed arrow volleys. On large defensive positions, you'd normally try and angle your concertina rows in an oblique fashion like this to create a funneling effect, and also then let your machine guns fire down the axis of the wire. But in this case, the terrain and frontage is so tight that doing so would mean reducing the effect of the guns, as they'd be firing into the mountains or into the ocean. Further out away from the hot gates, any bridges on the primary avenues of approach are fortunately not as strong as their modern reinforced concrete counterparts, so can be easily destroyed using explosives if needed to further delay the Persians. Emplace weapon systems. The 3 ETA platoons will be given separate tasks which will shift over the anticipated phases of the battle. Phase 1 sees 1 platoon mounted in their Polaris light vehicles tasked with harassing the Persian army on approach. 2 platoon is tasked with development of the position including the obstacle belts, and 3 platoon is responsible for MDP security, the UAS screen to support 1 platoon, and development of the ammo cache. Let's deep dive this later also. Phase 2, Defend. Phase 2 is the close fight for the hot gates proper. This will see EA Zeus saturated with direct fire weapons. 2 platoon will remain on point, utilizing their Minimize, Mag 58s, and rifle fire filling in the gaps. 3 platoon is the depth platoon on the position, vehicle mounted and employing the heavy weapons such as the 50 caliber machine guns and automatic grenade launchers. 1 platoon is to the rear of the position, providing rear security, reserve, an ISR screen, and quick reaction force. Hold up, I was editing this part having written it weeks before, and something didn't feel right with the wire. I realized I'd been placing it just based on, I suppose, contemporary thinking, instead of really tailoring it for this particular terrain and the enemy of the time. You see, oblique rows are designed to funnel modern infantry, who are slow-moving, spaced apart, and move as small teams, squads, and platoons, relative to the scale of the attack, of course. So I says to myself, but how would we set the wire up if we were expecting high-density human waves? Why not create perpendicular rows and break the tight frontage of the Persians into even tighter wire lanes, covered by machine guns? The wire is not going to outright halt their advance anyway, so doing this creates running tracks of murder that will only get more effective once clogged with piles of corpses. This wire arrangement would also be difficult to bust through by force. Much like a piece of timber, it is weaker in the middle and strong on the edges. You'd still want some of the oh shit rows of parallel close wire to the wall, but I think this perpendicular layout uses the wire to better effect when combined with direct fire for this particular type of enemy. Phase 3 is intended to spoil the inevitable Persian flanking attack, and it sees the Greeks scanning for the Persian envelopment, with 2 and 3 platoon remaining in location tasked with fixing the Persians, and 1 platoon being dispatched to interdict any flanking force. Finally, Phase 4 is the counter-attack itself, which will be triggered once the Persians are routed, and will see the Greeks mounting in their vehicles and pursuing their fleeing enemies. Step 6 is normally plan and integrate indirect fires, however, I've not given them any, so this is not applicable. So a quick yarn on logistics. As you'll remember before, I talked about an ammo cache. Let's explore this by the numbers. First, an ammo breakdown of all non-explosive weapons. For example, take the Minimi, of which there are 10 with 600 rounds a pop, for a total of 6,000 rounds, and a total of 32,830 rounds across all weapons. Next, let's speculate on the average rounds to kill, with the 7.62 guns, for example, taking 2 rounds per infantry, 3 rounds per cav, 3 per immortal, 4 per brute, and 25 per war beast. I won't die on the specifics of this hill, and you could argue the numbers, but these figures loosely consider that not every round fired will hit, but also that some rounds will over-penetrate and create multiple casualties. But I do feel these are very generous estimates, and they're more favourable to the Persians than the Greeks. Next, let's divide out the total rounds by the ARK, or average rounds to kill, which will in turn give us our TPK, or theoretical Persian kills. First, let's evenly distribute the ammunition ammunition per weapon across the 5 enemy classes, which I acknowledge isn't the most accurate method given the numbers are not even, but it makes for the simplest maths. For example, 5,220 7.62 total divided by 5 equals 1,044. 1,044 divided by 2 gives us 522 theoretical infantry kills by 7.62 rounds alone. Adding the columns shows 2,692 Persian infantry kills across all weapons, and a grand total of 8,323 total Persians killed by small arms. Next, we break down our explosives. The 40mm AGL, for example. There are 3 total across the unit with 250 rounds per, for a total of 750 40mm grenades and 1,074 total explosive units. Next, we calculate our explosive damage. And note that these figures are based off the tightly packed enemy horde, and casualties doesn't mean necessarily dead, but also critically wounded. For example, our AGL causes 5 casualties per grenade, and with 750 grenades give us 3,750 casualties, for a total of 5,838 casualties across all the explosive weapons. Combining the totals of the explosives and small arms casualties gives us 14,161, which is problematically well short of the 30% or 90,000 casualties needed. But if you consider that's the equivalent to wiping out a modern army division, it's still a pretty crazy figure. So let's fix this shortfall and divide 90,000 by 14,161, which gives us 6.355. Then multiply that by our current total rounds of 32,830 and our current total explosives of 1,074 units, which gives us a final figure of 208,634 rounds and 6,825 explosives required to inflict 90,000 casualties onto the Persians. Or in simple terms, if this tedious math stuff has you drooling in boredom, we need roughly 6 times the amount of ammunition currently available to get the job done. Part 5. Battle Simulation. Day 1. The battle starts with 1st Platoon mounted in the Polaris at the forward edge of the battle area. 2 Platoon are dismounted at the hot gates developing battle position Aries, and 3 Platoon mounted in their Humvees as QRF and ISR screen. As the Persians march down the Greek peninsula, the vanguard is engaged by buggies laying in ambush. After an initial panic reaction and deployment of their battle formation under the ruthless command of their officers, they realize their light shields are useless and call for the archers to counterattack. The Persians relay word to Xerxes of the invisible magic of the Greeks, who, enraged at their cowardice, orders them to press the attack. Under threat of execution by their own, the Persian infantry charge by the thousands, cut down in waves by the machine guns, but nonetheless trading casualties for ground gained, allowing archers to close distance and form ranks in an attempt to launch harassing fire at the Greeks. With the Persian archers closing to effective range, the Greeks fire and maneuver while withdrawing, blowing the bridges with demolition charges as they pass, further slowing the Persian advance. Approaching the creek lines, the terrain provides some cover from direct fire, and the Persians summon their engineers to begin repairing the bridge. Realizing the Greeks have the mobility advantage, the Persians deploy their cavalry, and on reaching the front line of contact, begin fording the shallow points of the river to pursue the Greek buggies. By this stage, the Greek MRZRs would be running low on ammunition, and after blowing the second bridge, call for ammunition resupply from the QRF platoon at the MDP. While the Greeks conduct their resupply, the Persian commanders push the archers to the forward edge of the battle line, and despite being raked by machine guns and taking heavy casualties, establish their volley formation and loose wave after wave across the creek. The sun-blotting arrows force the Greek buggies to withdraw from their loiter position on the riverbank to beyond maximum range of the archers. Although still in range of the Greek guns, this buys the Persians relative breathing space, who realize they need to consolidate their position and settle in for a protracted siege. With the archers still firing and taking the brunt of the casualties, the Persian commanders order the engineers to construct a protective berm on the near side of the river. Despite remaining under sustained fire, the immense manpower of the Persians sees thousands of men simultaneously digging up the topsoil, and working together they've soon constructed a low earth wall. With some protection from direct fire established, the archers are withdrawn behind the low berm as the engineers continue their digging, until the earth covers the height of a standing man. Despite sustaining thousands of casualties only hours into the battle on their approach thus far, the Persians now critically have line of sight cover from the Greek guns, allowing the archers to form up in safety and fire over the obstacle, effectively using swarms of arrows as terrain denial, and preventing the Greek vehicles from retaking the river crossing. With the crossing point secured, the main body can continue its march unopposed and establish the Persian war camp. As night falls on the first day, Xerxes is briefed by his generals on the day's events.
Speak to me of the vanguard battle thus far, Mardonius.
My lord, the Greeks possess a strange magic. Their arrows are invisible and strike from impossible distances. We've suffered thousands of dead.
10,000 casualties before we even reach the Greek front lines? Unacceptable!
Furious at the early losses, Xerxes disciplines his vanguard generals for their performance, with the time-tested method of decapitation by a fat, nipple-chained clawman. Terribly vexed by this poor start to the campaign, Xerxes storms from the war tent, brooding outside in the darkness while staring towards the distant hot gates. At exactly this moment, a waiting Greek sniper team on the forward slope of the mountain align their reticles on the shimmering golden chest of the God King and squeeze the trigger. Xerxes crumples like a sack of potatoes on the dirt in front of his tent. Slaves and concubine hurry outside of the commotion.
He's dead! The God King is dead! The war is over! Marvelous! Hooray!
Jokes, I'm kidding. Although that probably would be the fastest way to do away with the Persian army in this scenario. But then the battle would end right here, and that's not very sporting. So let's give them a fighting chance by not immediately killing Xerxes in one of the many ways the Greeks could. Hell, let's make it interesting. Let's deny the Greeks their night vision advantage so they can't probe and harass the Persian camp all night long. We're doing old school gentleman rules of warfare, tacitly agreeing to not fight at night, only taking up arms again at the crack of dawn. Day 2. In the grey morning light of the following day, with the engineers having repaired the bridges overnight, the Persian infantry form up in their assembly area. Now well rested from their march, they're ready to begin their attack proper. At the hot gates, the Greeks consolidate for the main defensive battle, with 2 platoon dismounted holding the Phocian wall, 3 platooners depth manning the vehicle-mounted heavy machine guns, and 1 platoon as rear security and QRF with their Polaris light vehicles. As soon as they enter the line of sight of the Greeks, the heavy machine guns open up, pouring 50 cal onto the approaching hordes. Already clustered together in battle formation and condensed by the terrain, the machine guns achieve frontal enfilade fire, with each burst tearing through multiple Persians. Despite the chaos of being shredded by tracer fire, the Persians are no longer strangers to the machine guns from the previous day's fighting, and their commanders push their attack. As they crush against the obstacle belt, the medium machine guns join the engagement, firing in a lateral traverse which rakes the front ranks of the Persian infantry. The path of least resistance for the attackers is to flow down the centre, weaving between the concertina and low wire entanglements. But this gap is covered by the light machine guns, and the tightly bunched infantry are cut down by the dozen. Those that do make it through the breach are targeted by snipers and riflemen, allowing the machine guns to continue their feast of the flesh. Despite the best efforts of the Persian commanders, the attack begins faltering, and the infantry retreat in a panic before even having reached the Phocian wall.
Send in the archers.
The Persian archers are legendary across the known world, and Xerxes intends to blot out the sun with wave after wave of arrow volleys. The archers approach the Greek lines behind their wicker shields. Recognizing the threat, the Greeks can't take the risk of allowing the archers to close within range, and open up with a collective blitz of fire on all machine guns. Well outside the effective range of their arrows, the Persian archers loose a haphazard volley in return that comes nowhere near the Greek lines, before withdrawing in disarray like the infantry before them.
Donkeys, send in the cavalry.
The cavalry thunders towards the Greek lines, flowing through the wide gap but becoming bogged down in the flanks. Being horse-mounted offers a speed advantage, and they manage to close the distance faster than their dismounted predecessors. The machine guns open up once more, and horses and men fall by the dozens, tripping up those charging behind. Groups of cavalry manage to jump and weave through the mess of corpses and gunfire, and surge towards the Phocian wall, knowing if they can break the defensive line, the Greeks will crumble. But closing in on the hot gates channels them into the obstacle lanes, which slows down the stampede and chokes up both horse and man in a murder line of wire. Despite this, the Persians press their gains, getting close enough to see the eyes of their enemy, sensing the fight is near, until the Greeks trigger a bank of claymores. Horse and man alike are shredded in a terrible explosion of blood and steel. The obstacle lanes become a tangled mess of corpses, meat, and wire. The detonation proves too much for the approaching horses, who buck and rear in a desperate attempt to escape the bloodbath, with the machine guns hammering depth and the riflemen picking off survivors in the entanglement. Although having fared better than the archers, the great charge of the Persian cavalry also ends in retreat.
Greek cowards, let's see them stop the Immortals.
Xerxes deploys his most elite unit, the Immortals, highly trained, veteran heavy infantry equipped with the finest steel helmets and armor in the Persian Empire. They approach the Greek lines in battle formation, before breaking into a sprint as they approach the obstacles. The brutes roar as they attack the barricade, sponging 5.56 rounds while hacking and slashing to open up the sections weakened by the cavalry. The Immortals surge past the obstacle belt and thunder towards the Greek position. The Greek machine guns reply with the same calculated precision, firing on tightly controlled sectors and arcs of fire. As the lead Immortals drop like flies, they are immediately replaced by those to the rear. Witnessing the steadfast resolve of these newcomers, the Greeks unleash their automatic grenade launchers, lobbing bursts of 40mm rounds towards the bulk of the throng. The Immortals and brutes working their way through the wire are obliterated by the barrage. as the grenades tear through flesh and steel with explosive and fragmentation damage. With the grenade launchers shredding the rear, the machine guns can focus on the near immortals, with snipers targeting the brutes with 338 rounds to fell the Goliaths. Watching from the distant hills, Xerxes roars in rage as his most elite troops also succumb to the massacre, and reluctantly orders their withdrawal from the fray. The setting sun brings the end to another day of slaughter for the Persians. Once night falls, the Greeks seize the opportunity to refit for the next day, cleaning and maintaining weapons, restocking ammunition, and repairing and replacing any claymores or damage to the obstacles. Meanwhile, in Xerxes' war tent, the God King is slowly coming to accept the superiority of the Greeks' advanced weaponry.
Curse the Greeks, hiding behind their wile and witchcraft. My lord, a messenger approaches. He claims to be a Greek farmer. Send him in.
O generous God King of Kings, I am Ephialtes. My lord, I think you should know. There is a hidden path that goes into the mountains. It will allow you to go around the hot gates.
Can you please not draw on that?
Forgive me, wise lord, but you will be able to send a small force around the Greek position.
Excellent, Ephialtes. You will lead the immortals along the path. But we must get our archers within range of the Phocian wall. My lord, the Mahouts may have a solution to the Greek barricades. Yes. Good. As for the Greek magic, we believe that this heavy shield may stop some of their weapons and allow our archers to move within striking distance. Yes, this pleases the God King. Instruct the engineers to begin construction at once. We attack at dawn.
Day 3. In the pre-dawn darkness of the third day, the Greek UAS screen reveals the immortals moving towards the goat track. First Platoon immediately redeploys to cover this alternate avenue of approach, driving their vehicles as far into the mountains as possible before dismounting to continue on foot up the narrow path. This leaves only 2nd and 3rd Platoon manning the walls, without any reserve troops on site or a dedicated crew conducting ISR scans. At dawn, the Greeks hear an ominous rumble, and scanning to the east with their optics, see a wall of dust rising in the distance as the Persian war beasts stampede along the coast. Elephants running line abreast, frenzied by pursuing Persian cavalry. The Greeks open fire with their heavy weapons, the booming gunfire of M2 Brownings ripping apart the early morning silence. Covered in heavy steel armor, the war beasts roar as the 50 caliber rounds thud into their hides, striking both plating and flesh. As they crush into the outer obstacle belt, the heavy chain attached to their harnesses begins ploughing steel stakes and barbed wire from the ground. The Greeks switch to their anti-tank weapons and fire volleys of AT-4 rockets and Carl Gustav rounds towards the behemoths. The beasts howl in pain as they fall one by one, felled by the explosive damage. The battlefield falls silent as the last elephant collapses in a heap, but watching from the distance, Xerxes is pleased. The animals served their purpose.
The Greek barricade is no more. Send in the shields.
Having spent the night collecting every piece of steel throughout the war camp, the Persians wheel in their mobile blockade. Pushed by infantry, the heavy shields provide some protection from the Greek light machine guns, and gives the Persians the opportunity to advance their archers behind the shield wall. Meanwhile, on the goat path, the now dismounted 1st Platoon makes contact with the lead element of the Immortals. In the steep terrain of the mountain, the battle is close and chaotic. The Greeks fire and maneuver, keeping the Immortals engaged as long as possible before withdrawing. But the Immortals understand the importance of their flanking mission and pursue the Greeks with reckless abandon, clambering forward along the narrow path despite being gunned down by the Greeks. Back at the hot gates, the shield wall creeps closer under withering machine gun fire, and while the shield bearers take casualties from penetrating rounds, the Persian infantry replace their dead instantly, keeping the formation solid, and slowly but surely creeping the archers closer and closer. The archers finally get within range and lob a massed volley towards the Phocian wall. The Greeks, not protected by the wall or vehicles, scramble to deploy their right shields, reducing the outgoing weight of firepower. With the arrows now finally achieving suppression, Xerxes commits his attack force once more.
Send in the cavalry.
The horses thunder around the archery formation and beeline towards the Greek position, still taking casualties but pressing forwards covered by the Persian archers. Smashing into the close wire obstacle lanes, the Greeks are forced into close combat, switching their rifle fire from distant archers to the cavalry in the wire. The Persian archers continue their tremendous volleys, indiscriminately killing both Greeks and many Persians in the scrimmage at the Phocian wall. As the fight at the hot gate becomes a bloodbath of steel blades against pistols and bayonets, the seemingly endless Persian cavalry continues swarming towards the hot gates. The Greeks realize they're being overwhelmed, and under the constant rain of Persian arrows can no longer effectively engage the Persians in depth. Recognizing something drastic must be done, the Greek commander channels his inner King Theoden of Rohan and decides to greet steel with steel. Mounted in 2 Humvees, a squadron 3rd platoon explodes through the gap in the Phocian wall, smashing through metal and man-flesh as they plough into the Persian attackers, raking their machine gun across their front to clear a path. Taking no heed of the cavalry on the flanks, the Humvees tear towards the Persian archers, thousands of arrows streaming overhead. The Persian archers waver as they see the steel chariots bearing down on them, their commanders too late realizing the threat. As the Humvees pull to a screeching halt within 25 meters of the shield wall and unleash a storm of machine gun fire. The M2 Brownings belching flames as they rake the Persian ranks and tearing deep into the rows of tightly stacked troops. The Persian commanders bellow at their men to hold fast, but the point-blank sight and sound of the fire-breathing Humvees causes the archers to lose their resolve, and they quickly break ranks and turn tail. Back on the goat path, the dismounted 1st platoon recognise the Immortals are not rattled by their rifle fire, and break contact in order to establish an ambush further up the track. Setting up claymores and sighting machine guns, the Greeks lay in wait until the Persians enter the kill zone, and initiate the explosion. Dozens of Immortals are instantly cut down by fragmentation. The Greeks capitalise on the violence of the ambush, engaging with a rapid rate of fire from all weapons. Thinking they've hit the position of a larger force, the Immortals order a general retreat, and commence their withdrawal back towards the Persian battle camp. With the Persian archers in a full rout back at the hot gates, the cavalry lose their much-needed offensive support, and those not committed to the attack reconsider their advance, as the Humvees switch their focus to the flanking columns, firing on the move as they speed back to support the Greeks at the Phocian wall. The vehicles make their way safely back behind friendly lines, and the Greeks are free to open up with everything they have. The Persian cavalry fought valiantly, but without their supporting archers are doomed. Those committed to the melee fight to the last man, while those who are able free themselves of the wire and join their comrades in retreat. The Greeks decide to capitalise on the initiative gained from the Humvee charge and launch the final phase of their defensive plan, the counterattack. Mounting up in all their Humvees, they pursue the fleeing Persians up the coastline, the archers and cavalry running for their lives towards the main camp. Witnessing the retreat, Xerxes howls in despair, having committed his best troops and all resources into his decisive final assault. The God King understands his gambit has failed. As the Greek Humvees chase the attacking force straight back across the river, the campsite immediately turns into a scene of anarchy. The vehicles halt and begin spraying heavy machine guns in all directions. Persian soldiers, auxiliary personnel, and slaves alike instantly abandon their posts, fleeing back up the peninsula away from the fire-breathing steel beasts of the Greeks. The now catatonic Xerxes is hidden away in a slave wagon by his personal guard, and making use of the turmoil, hurriedly whisked away through the panicked crowd. With their godlike commander nowhere to be seen, the few Persians still in combat are bereft of the will to fight, and the Greek guns fall silent as the remaining combatants and civilians surrender en masse. With his army utterly demoralized and his losses so great, Xerxes' ambitions to conquer Greece are forgotten to the footnotes of revised YouTube history. As always, thank you for the gift of your time.